Hi, Assalamualaikum, and welcome back to our new chapter, which is part of the capacity and aggregate planning. So this is the supplement 7. If you open up to page 568, you will read on the global company profile, which is by Frito-Lay. Aggregate planning basically provides a competitive advantage to Frito-Lay. So like any other organization throughout the world, Frito-Lay relies on effective aggregate planning to match fluctuating multi-million dollar demand to capacity in its 36 North American plants. And planning for the intermediate term, 3 to 18 months, is the heart of the aggregate planning of Frito-Lay. And effective aggregate planning combined with a tight scheduling, effective maintenance, and efficient employee and facility scheduling are the keys to the high plant utilization. High utilization is a critical factor in facilities such as Frito-Lay, where capital investment is substantial. Frito-Lay has more than 3 dozen brands of snacks, chips, 15 of which sells more than 100 million annually, and 7 of which sells over 1 billion. Its brands include such well-known names as Fritos, Lay's, Doritos, Sun Chips, Cheetos, Tostitos, Flat Earth, and Ruffles. So all these names are basically, if you open up American movies, you can definitely find out this. Or if you are familiar to 7-Eleven, you probably find some of these products there, right? So unique processes, including specially designed equipment, are required to produce each of these products because these specialized processes generate high fixed costs and they must operate at a very high volume. But such product-focused facilities benefit by having low variable costs, high utilization, and performances above the break-even point requires a good match between demand and capacity. Idle equipment is actually going to be a disaster. So at Frito-Lay's headquarters near Dallas, planners create a total demand profile. So they use historical product sales, forecasts of new products, product innovation, product promotion, and dynamic local demand data from account managers to forecast the demand. So planners then match the total demand profile to existing capacity and capacity expansion plan and cost. So this becomes the aggregate plan. So the aggregate plan is communicated to each of the firm's 70 regions and to 36 plants. And every quarter, the headquarters and each plant modify the respective plans to incorporate changing market condition and plant performance. So each plant uses its quarterly plan to develop a 4-week plan, which in turn assigns specific products to a specific product lines for production runs. And finally, each week raw materials and labor are assigned to each process. So effective aggregate planning is basically the major factor in high utilization of the capacity, and definitely it becomes the low cost of the company, as the company's 60% market share indicates excellent aggregate planning yields a competitive advantage at Frito-Lay's. So the learning objectives of this study that first you should be able to define the sales and operations planning, define what is aggregate planning, identify optional strategies for developing an aggregate plan. So now when we look at this, we begin with understanding the tasks and responsibilities. So as you can see on the left hand side, okay, so here we can see that there are 3 different level of management, from top executives, operation managers with sales and operation planning team, and operation managers, supervisors, and also foremen. So on the right hand side is the planning tasks and the time horizons. So if you see, the top executive is basically doing the long range plans, which is consisting of over 1 year. Okay, for the long 1 year, they are actually being decided and being is the responsibility of the top executives. So they are deciding the capacity decisions critical to long range plans. So among the issues that they face are research and development, new product plannings, capital investments, and also facility location and expansion. Meanwhile, for the middle managers, which consists of operation managers, the sales and operation planning team, they are doing the intermediate range plans, which is 3 to 18 months punya range lah. So the issues include the sales and operation planning, production planning, and budgeting, setting employment, inventory, subcontracting levels, and also analyzing the plans of operation. Meanwhile, for the operation managers, supervisors, and also foremen, they are actually dealing with short range plans which consists of 1 up to 3 months. So this is requiring the scheduling techniques as we have discussed previously in the class yesterday. So the issues is actually based on the job assignments, dealing with ordering, job scheduling, dispatching, and overtime of the workers and part-time workers. So when talking about the planning, horizontal of the planning, definitely we requires sales and operation to work together. So the basically it is all about how you deal with your demand. So coordination of demand forecasts with functional areas and the supply chain. Okay, so typically done by a cross-functional teams, which is sales and operations, determine which plans which are feasible for their plan, and limitation must be reflected. Then they should be provided with warnings when resources do not match the expectation. And basically the output is an aggregate planning or a long-term plan. You begin with the product decisions. So product decision is basically come out from the demand forecasting, by the sales and operation planning, as you can see in this area. So the sales and operation develop an aggregate plan based on the demand forecast and based on the product which have been developed. Okay, and also they include the research and technology during the product decisions. And then within and for operation planner, they also need to consider the workforce that they have, the inventory on hand, whether the supply chain or the raw materials are ample for the production capacity, and they also need to consider on the subcontractors or the external capacity or the third parties. Right. So all these elements must be considered before the long-term plan are being made. Okay, so this is the complexities of the sales and operation and how they need to do a long-term or the aggregate planning. So decision must be tied to strategic planning and integrated with all areas of the firm overall planning horizons. So sales and operation planner is aimed at the coordination and integration of the internal and external resources necessary for a successful aggregate plan, and communication of the plan to those charged with its execution. So sales and operation planning requires a logical unit for measuring sales and output, forecasting, method to determine the relevant costs, and model that combines forecasts and costs so scheduling decisions can be made for the planning period. So apa benda tu aggregate planning? What basically is aggregate planning? It is the objective of aggregate planning is usually to meet forecast demand, and at the same time you need to minimize your cost over your planning period. Regardless of the firm, the objective of aggregate planning is usually to meet forecast demand while minimizing costs over the planning period. However, other strategies issues may be more important than low cost. So these strategies may be to smooth employment, to drive down inventory levels, or to meet a high level of service regardless of the cost. So this is the example by Snapper. Snapper, which produce many different models of lawn mowers. So Snapper makes walk behind mowers, rear engine riding mowers, garden tractors, and many other type of lawn mowers. So for a total of 145 models, and for each month in the upcoming 3 quarters, the aggregate planning for Snapper might have the following output. So which is shown in the unit of production. So if you look at the plan, you will note that the plan looks at production in the aggregate, so the family of mowers, and not as the product by product breakdown. So likewise, an aggregate planning for BMW, for example, tells the auto manufacturer how many cars to make, but not how many should be 2 doors versus 4 doors or red versus green. It tells the producer of the raw materials of steel on how many tons of steel to produce, but does not differentiate on the grades of steel. So that's how aggregate planning is working. Yeah. So in a manufacturing environment, the process of breaking the aggregate plan down into greater detail is called disaggregation. Disaggregation results in a master production schedule, which provides input to material requirements planning or MRP systems, and the master production schedule addresses the purchasing or production of major parts of components, and it is not a sales forecast. Detailed work schedules for people and priority scheduling for products result as the final step of the production planning system, which are discussed in the other chapter, which is chapter 15. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, in aggregate planning, it combines appropriate resource into general terms. Okay, maknanya raw materials for production of that lawnmowers are being requested to these suppliers so that they can actually provide a similar, instead of they are telling which of the lawnmowers that they require which types of raw materials, they just request for one single similar products or similar raw materials. So part of larger production planning system, and this aggregation breaks the plan down into greater detail. This is what they call as disaggregation, and from the disaggregation, it results in a master production schedule. So now we look at the aggregate planning strategies. So there are a few questions that strategists should consider. First, should inventories be used to absorb changes in demand during the planning period? Should changes be accommodated by varying the size of the workforce? Should part-timers be used, or should overtime and idle time absorb fluctuations? Should subcontractors be used on fluctuating orders so a stable workforce can be maintained? And fifth is, should prices or other factors be changed to influence demand? So all of these planning strategies, it involve the manipulation of inventory, production rates, labor levels, capacity, and other controllable variables. And we will now just examine there are a few options. To be precise, we have 8 options in more detail. So the first 5 are called capacity options, because they do not try to do changes demand but attempt to absorb demand fluctuations. And the last 3 are demand options, through which firms try to smooth out changes in demand pattern over the planning period. So the first one is the capacity option, is changing inventory levels. So managers can increase the inventory in low demand periods to meet high demand in the future. So they also increase costs associated with storage, insurance, handling, obsolescence, pilferage, and capital investment. And they also will try to shortage may mean lost sales due to long lead times and poor customer service. The second capacity option we have is varying workforce size by hiring or layoffs. So match production rate to demand, training and separation costs for hiring and laying off workers. No new workers may have a lower productivity, so they can actually lay off or do not hire this kind of workers. Laying off workers which may have lower morale and also are not productive. The next option we have is varying production rates through overtime or idle time. So this basically you try to allow constant workforce. May be difficult to meet large increases in demand. Overtime can be much more costly and may drive down your productivity due to burnout or fatigue. Absorbing idle time is basically difficult to be done. The fourth option is subcontracting. This is basically a temporary measure during periods of peak demand. It usually costly, and the problem is assuring the quality and timely delivery can be one difficult task for subcontracting. And it basically expose your customer to a possible competitors because your workers are going everywhere, every place to work. Okay, next option we have, or the fifth option, is the using part-time workers. So useful for filling unskilled or low-skilled positions, especially in the service sectors. Okay, the next is the demand option. So basically, demand option is the act of you influence your demand. So by using advertising or promotion to increase demand in low periods, attempt to shift demand to slow periods, and it may not be sufficient to balance demand and capacity. The second demand option is back ordering during high demand periods. So requires customer to wait for an order without loss of goodwill or the order. Most effective when there are few, if any, substitutes for product or service, and often results in lost sales. The third demand option we have is counter-seasonal product and service mixing. So develop a product mix of counter-seasonal items, which we have explained yesterday about the jet ski and also the snow, the snow machine, and mainly to products of or service outside the company's areas of expertise. So this is the aggregate planning option table, which shows you the option and advantage and disadvantages and the comments. For example, changing inventory levels. The advantage is that changes in human resource are gradual or none, no abrupt production changes. But the disadvantages is inventory holding can basically cause you a lot, and shortages may result in loss of sales. So applies mainly to production, not service, and also operations. Yeah. So the second option is varying workforce size by hiring or layoffs. The advantage is avoid the costs or other alternatives. Disadvantage is hiring, layoff, and training costs may be significant. So use where size of labor pool is much more bigger. So third option is varying production rates through overtime or idle time. The advantages is you can have a matches seasonal fluctuation without hiring or training costs. And the disadvantages include overtime premiums, tired workers, and you may not able to meet your demand. So comments allow flexibility within the aggregate planning. The fourth option is subcontracting. The advantage include permits, flexibility, and smoothing of the firm output. The disadvantage, you can basically lose your quality control, loss of profit, and loss of your business. So it applies mainly if you in the production settings. Yeah. The fifth option is using part-time workers. Advantage is much more not that costly, and you have the flexibility rather than having a full-time workers. The disadvantage include much more high turnover. You're going to have a higher training costs. You might suffer in your quality, and you can also face difficulties in scheduling. But this is good for unskilled jobs or lower jobs which require low skill area, and in areas which have a large pools of temporary labor. Next option is by influencing demand. The advantage is try to use excess capacity, you discount draw your new customer. And the disadvantage is that there are uncertainty in demand, so it's hard to match demand to supply exactly. So it creates marketing ideas, overbooking views in some business. So back ordering during high demand periods, you can actually take the advantage of avoiding overtime and keeps capacity at constant. But the problem is the customer must be willing to wait, but you may also have the risk of loss in your goodwill. So many companies back orders lah basically. So the next option is counter seasonal product and service mixing. So the advantages is fully utilizes resources, allows stable workforce. While the disadvantage, you may require skills or equipment outside the firm's areas of expertise, and this is usually you're going to face some risk in finding products or services with opposite demand patterns. So you can also have the option of mixing your options, right? So a mix strategy may be the best way to achieve your minimum cost, and there are many possible mix strategies, and it's all about you finding your optimal plan. Yeah. First, we have a chase strategy where you match output rates to demand forecast for each period, vary workforce level or vary production rate, and favored by many organization which is doing services. Next is level strategy. So daily production must be uniform. Use the inventory or idle time as a buffer, and stable production leads to better quality and productivity. So this requires the combination of capacity option, which is a mixed strategy and can be the best solution. So the next is the graphical methods. It's one of the most popular techniques. It is claimed to be easy to be understand and use. It can also be a trial and error approaches that do not guarantee an optimal solution, and it basically requires some competition but at limited, not that much. So what is the steps of the graphical methods? First, determine the demand for each period. Second, determine the capacity for regular time, overtime, and subcontracting within each period. Third is find labor costs, hiring and layoff costs, and inventory holding costs. Fourth is consider company policy on workers and stock levels. And fifth is develop alternative plans and examine their total cost. Now we look into the aggregate planning in services. So most services use combined strategies and mixed plans. Controlling the cost of labor is basically critical because service is a labor intensive area. Yeah? So accurate scheduling are required. So labor hours must be checked to ensure quick response to customer demand. And on-call labor resource to cover unknown or unexpected demand. Flexibility must be used, especially of individual worker skills, and flexibility in rate of your output of hours of work. We look into 5 service scenarios. First, we look into restaurants. So we can see that smoothing the production process by determining the optimal workforce size. Next is hospitals. Is basically responding to patient demand. Next, we have national chains of small service firms where planning done at national level and at local level. Others, miscellaneous service, plan human resource requirement and manage demand. In airline industry, we can see extremely complex planning problem because of number of flights, number of passengers on all flights, air and ground personnel at each hub and airport, allocation of seats to fare classes. So that's all for the aggregate planning chapter that we're going to we have explored. Yeah, we have so I hope you read further in the textbook. We are not going to talk about the calculations. We just covered on the how the concept of the aggregate planning and also capacity planning. With that, thank you very much for your concentration and your time. Hope to see you again soon. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.